Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk about our modernization of the end user experience with Unified Workspace during this session. So hopefully you found the right flight. My name's Ian Haynes. I'm part of the product marketing organization for Dell Technologies. And as one of the senior product marketing managers, I focus on Unified Workspace. Effectively, we're bringing together solutions to help you simplify the steps that it takes to deliver technology to your end users, is the just really brief summary of what that is. I'll go into quite a bit more detail. At the same time, I want you to think about the context for why we've embarked on this sort of technology area. Oftentimes, we talk about the Unified Workspace as an opportunity to accelerate our workforce transformation. And we kind of gloss over what a workforce transformation is, what's driving this shift inside all of our organizations. At the end of the day, you in this room as technologists have done, frankly, an incredible job of mainstreaming cloud, of enabling and redefining the data center at the core. And then as we move out to the edge and you think about end user devices, those devices have dramatically changed, and the way that we're consuming information has dramatically changed. Each of those touch points have very much affected the way that we work, the way that we consume information, and we're evolving that as we continue forward. If you think about the key takeaway for a workforce transformation, though, everything I just mentioned, which is technology, falls to the background. At the end of the day, your workforce transformation is based on, frankly, the employees and the people inside your organization. The people are the driver of a workforce transformation. And if we keep that in mind as one of the critical factors, and I think there are two, use that as sort of our guidepost, we can really then talk about how do we accelerate and enable our users to be more productive. If we keep them front and center, that's where all of this technology really comes together to frankly make our users that much more productive, which is the overall goal. The second factor that I was just describing is just frankly a recognition that we've moved away from our very traditional modes of delivering information, and most of the information we deliver now is digital. The thing I don't want you to forget about this, though, all of our big ideas having moved into the data center, into our endpoint devices, we analyze, we share them. The sort of treasure of your organization is oftentimes the digital information that you've created. The most important piece of that information, though, is we need to be able to communicate it. We need to be able to use it and analyze it as people in order to make that more effective as we move forward. If you think about your workforce transformation with those two lenses, it gives us a great foundation for really evaluating how we're using technology inside our end user communities. Now, it may not be a surprise to you then to think about the user experience as becoming a critical differentiator for your organization. If you think about the way that your organization operates and the types of activities that you want to promote, keeping our users front and center is what it's all about. Now, over the last probably year, maybe year and a half, I've had this really remarkable, just firsthand experience with my customers that would say something to the effect of, maybe let's call it 18 months ago, most organizations I would talk to would have one metric for technology for their users. It was cost. That doesn't go away. It is still one of our key business requirements, and it will continue to be a key business metric. What's been surprising to me is that over a course of maybe the last 8 months or so, every customer I go to talk to has now started to include some form of a user experience metric. And I think of that as a proxy for how do you develop and increase overall productivity inside the organization. As the organization's needs shift, as the way that we work and consume all of that multi-cloud ready data, our opportunity now is to really start to enhance and figure out how we track the improved performance based on the technology. One of the surveys that we did very early this year and published is focused on the overall user experience. And I don't think it will surprise any of you to see about 61% of our users are saying, look, at the end of the day, I still have significant glitches, bugs, some kind of freeze that is slowing my overall productivity down. That's more than half of most organizations are having a productivity impact. And I kind of put it to you this way in a slightly different manner. If you think about, kind of my first couple of steps this morning, I had my cup of coffee, I logged in with my password and my second factor authentication. Now, if you think about that, I am now part of the corporate network. I have full access to all of the information. I love this. I just checked the box. I'm now productive for the day, right? I can go home. I don't have to do anything else. That two-factor login, that authentication step, the first thing that I do every day, is not necessarily what got me to productivity. And if I have to do that repeatedly over the course of the day as I close and open my laptop lid, 2, 3, 4 times a day, I may be slowing down that user. If I can take those steps potentially out of the way, still maintain the enterprise security, now I have a very different user experience. In my case, and I haven't really totaled this up, I should probably do the calculation at some point, I feel like I've gotten about a week of my life back this year alone simply by removing that step. I'm not recommending removing multi-factor authentication, just to be clear, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. If bug fixes or freezes and bugs, glitches are impacting productivity, the bottom two numbers here really denote what I've heard from customers time and time again. We're now increasing our focus on productivity, and that is changing as we become more mobile with our information, whether that be a work from home or just working down the hallway. About 84% of you are focusing on improving the overall productivity as a key metric along with cost. The final number here that we're focused on, the 77%, is the number of folks that are then focusing on improving the overall experience. And those are oftentimes corollaries to each other. But I want you to think about this. If that top number is true, and we're running into the glitches, you and your teams, as technologists, are spending about 80% of your time focused on break fix, on keeping the lights on, and making certain that your existing infrastructure is maintained. That gives me about 20% of my time to think about acquisition of new device, acquisition of new tools and software to enable my users, and then distribute that out to the wider infrastructure. It gives me probably, about 5%, maybe 1% of my time to then strategically plan what is my next workforce transformation step. We're spending a lot of time, and this is what I hear from most customers as they come in to talk to Dell Technologies. I want to transform my business. I have things that I know that I want to accomplish in terms of automation, in terms of enabling the user experience, but at the same time, I can't. I need to spend the majority of my time making certain that the systems that I have are up and running, that my very diverse infrastructure of endpoints, of software tools are maintained. Now, if you think about that, then it's no surprise we're saying that the user experience is a priority, but the routine and maintenance tasks that we're focused on are the part that are frankly consuming the vast majority of our time. How do we disrupt that model is really what we're focused on when we look at the unified workspace. The Dell Technologies Unified Workspace, I want you to think of as not just one product. This is a portfolio of solutions, and they're really designed as those puzzle pieces to help address your specific need currently, and then allow you to grow and maintain a much broader picture for your overall infrastructure. Now, you'll see that we talk about being the industry's most comprehensive solution to deploy, secure, manage, and support. I like the buzz phrase, right? I like the byline that we have here. But at the end of the day, I think it somewhat misses the point. And so I'm glad you're here. What I would share with you is the stuff that's going on below the slide. The element that we're not describing on this page is simply that we're now taking the Dell technologies, the intellectual property from Dell software, Dell hardware, our services and the ability to help you deploy and consult, along with VMware Workspace ONE and SecureWorks, and bringing that IP together. Better integrating it is the first step. The second step that we're doing is then that gives you a wealth of data that is already inside your organization. And how do we take that information and produce better and better automation? In a deployment context, what that means is that we'll be able to allow you to take your existing image, take that back, we'll allow you to take your software and tools and apply them directly to the appropriate user profile inside your organization. What that means is that I'll be able to take a system directly from the Dell factory and ship it to your end user. That device would already be under your management, have the right software tools on the device, and be able to update as needed. From a security perspective, what we're doing is linking together more security sensors. Those are both inside the operating system and outside of the operating system to help you reduce the security risk throughout the environment. And I'll give you some key concrete examples where we're taking things like BIOS protection layers and then pulling those up so that your security tools have a better sense of what's going on both inside the OS but outside of the OS where many security solutions, frankly, find that layer to be invisible. From a managed perspective, we use VMware Workspace ONE. If you're familiar with AirWatch, that was rebranded with some additional capabilities added to create Workspace ONE. At the end of the day, we use this as a unified endpoint management solution, bringing together the various devices in your organization, whether those be smartphones and tablets, Windows PCs, or alternative OSs. Finally, from a support perspective, we already provide proactive hardware support. What this will do in the Unified Workspace is expand to provide more proactive support at the OS and application layers. And we'll talk about some concrete examples there as well. There are three aspects here. The first aspect is that these are standalone tools that you can acquire. The second is simply that you could use and leverage these as part of an as-a-service model, allowing you to scale up or scale down as you need to acquire the tool set. And then finally, as a managed service, if you want to offload some of those tasks, whether that be direct support and support calls or management and up-to-date needs of drivers and software updates for those systems. As I mentioned, Dell Technologies is somewhat in a unique position based on the intellectual property. As we pull those various properties together, it will give you more and more opportunity to then automate the existing tasks that we're talking about. That said, the key takeaway should be we recognize that your environment is very dispersed, very mixed, whether that be the smart devices or other non-traditional endpoints such as printers, handheld IoT scanners, and so on. What this means is that we want the solution to be open and adaptable, create a flexible foundation for you to adopt solutions today And then as you move forward to the future, start thinking about what is the key technology, the key software application that would make your users most productive. Probably hasn't been created. How can we create a platform that will allow you to have the flexibility and improvements that you need today, and nearly drag and drop the new platform or the new software stack into that environment as we move forward in future? So first stop and the first pillar that we focus on is deployment. From a deployment perspective, I mentioned we can take a device, we take a little bit of our VMware IP and plug that into our Dell factory to now allow you to upload your image. Once in the Dell factory, that device can be shipped directly to your hub or out to your end user, and the device is already under your cloud-enabled management. I want you to think about it this way. In the typical context, this right here is your box cutter. You've just had 10, 100, or 1,000 systems arrive at your front doorstep. The first thing that we're going to do is take the Get Started guide, the user experience quick start, and forget about it. The user doesn't need that. I'm going to plug the device in. I'll spend a couple of hours updating it. I'll plug it back into the box, and then I'll get my logistics spreadsheet out to understand who should come and pick them up and which ones do I need to relabel, repackage, and ship out to an end user. That's the traditional context. I've got one gentleman over here smiling, and I see most of you nodding. What if I could take many of those steps out of the way? Instead, you create the image. It is inclusive of the individual profile inside your organization, and that is not necessarily a holistic group. Maybe phrasing this a little better, I can deliver a group, a profile, or down to an individual, the specific tools for their organization. My group of innovators here, my group of sales team over here, and finally my marketing team down here, you're all the same, so I'm going to give you the same tools. In the traditional model, as we move forward with Unified Workspace, what we'll be able to do is provide that individual user the software tools that are specific to their need. Once you've pulled in the various applications to profile, you upload that PPKG file to Dell. Our service delivery manager then will install that in our factory as part of the normal factory process. That device is already under your management, so as we ship it out and it arrives at your user's doorstep or to your distribution hub, I don't have to take it out of the box. Any updates that I need to do at a hardware level, say down to the firmware and update the BIOS, I can do as part of the profile update. As soon as the user takes the device out of the box, they log in for the first time. As they connect to your cloud management, your device is now provisioning and doing the final steps or any updates that are necessary from an OS or software stack layer. I'll talk about in just a moment how that differs from some of our autopilot implementations, which we also offer. For right now, if you think of ProDeploy in the Unified Workspace, we're very much talking about a parallel paradigm where you can upload your image and have all of those tools ready for the user already on the device. This extends our existing capabilities through Dell. If you think of the first column as what I've just described as being able to provision inside the Dell factory with user-specific tools. In the second context, ProDeploy and ProDeploy Plus are a host of services that enable us to do very traditional imaging models, if you so desire, simply providing asset tags, imaging services, or just frankly installing your Goldmaster image in our factory. We can deliver all of that and deliver that out to your systems to allow you to then do those final stage updates as you are today. The last model here on the far right is also providing support for autopilot. Through our Dell factory as well as our Dell online services, you're able to register your newly acquired devices as part of the autopilot service. That device would then be published inside of the For Business store for your accounts. Now, as a result, what we're able to do is then either allow you to use Workspace ONE, Microsoft Intune, or other MDM services to then manage that autopilot distribution. The key difference between the first column and the last column currently is that we can allow you to have the software already included in the image as part of the unified workspace. As we leverage VMware Workspace ONE, you're creating a standardized package that's uploaded for that system with the tools on it. The next step here is that as we look at the deployment capabilities across Dell Technologies, we have been the #1 partner for Microsoft for going on 8 years now. We've done more OS migration and engagements with customers in this area than just about anyone else. Now, if you think about those capabilities, it gives us a much broader footprint of being able to consult on where your current image needs are and where you may want to move in future. If we can help you reduce steps in that process, this is a win on both counts. Then transitioning into an autopilot environment becomes, a very viable opportunity. The second pillar that we were showcasing is security. If you think about security in the environment today, we often think about prevention of malware and the types of agents that we can deploy. In the Dell context, we expand that, and we take a more holistic look, starting with the device itself. We believe that you need to consider what the design, the build, and distribution is, of course, and that whole supply chain security is sort of built in to each of the devices that we create. But once you receive the device, our first column here focuses on trusted devices. And this is frankly at use. After you receive the device and bring the device into operation, do you have the right capabilities, the right foundation for that endpoint to actually access all of the critical information inside your organization? We roll this up as 3 key technologies: Safe ID, Safe BIOS, and Safe Screen. The Safe ID is a host of hardware technologies, some very traditional that you're familiar with, like the TPM, the Trusted Platform Module. This is frankly attestation and encryption key storage. Our team has helped pioneer and helps with the rest of industry write the 2.0 specifications and continues to help pioneer the next phase of the TPM module. At the same time, the ones that you may not be as familiar with and relatively unique to Dell is hardware isolation for your login, for your authentication. Now, we call this the Dell Control Vault. It's a standalone processor, an isolated processor and storage, so that when I swipe a fingerprint, say, across a fingerprint sensor, there's a hardened communication from the sensor down to the chip. Well, why do we do that? If I steal your password tomorrow, what do? I call IT, I make certain that there's awareness, and I replace my password. If I steal your fingerprint, what do I do next? Well, I've got 9 more I can choose from. We want to take a very different approach with our biometric data. We want to make certain that that data stays in isolation, which is why we have this isolated processor. The information doesn't go to Google, it doesn't go to your Azure Active Directory, and it doesn't reside anywhere on the Dell software stack. Instead, the template itself is evaluated inside that secure processor. Now, with that isolation of authentication is one step. By the way, how do you enable this? Frankly, you download the Control Vault driver on any of your Dell Latitude or mobile workstation systems. That will then activate the fingerprint sensor, the smart card contact reader, or the contactless reader. Once you've done that, it now leverages the Windows biometric framework. So your fingerprint and Windows Hello, for example, using your Azure multi-factor authentication, it's basically native to the system, is my point. Install the driver and you should be ready to go in the fingerprint reader context. The second technology stack that we have up here, Safe BIOS. Safe BIOS is, frankly, an umbrella term that is used to describe roughly 7 different technologies. The vast majority of those Dell has helped pioneer. Things like BIOS signing to make certain that there's a certificate on the BIOS that you've downloaded and that firmware update is ready to be evaluated by the local hardware. So there's a handshake between the two to help prevent tamper attempts. There are many other technologies like that, Intel Boot Guard and BIOS Guard, for example, that have become industry standards. We're proud of helping pioneer that part of the industry, as well as local auto recovery solutions. That said, where Safe BIOS is unique and where I'll focus our attention today is with an off-host verification. I'll say this a little differently. This is a technology that now, really for the first time in industry, allows you to evaluate if your BIOS has been impacted by malware. We are now seeing in the wild instances of malware, so malware sitting outside of the OS layer and down at the hardware that is effectively, let's say, invisible to many security solution layers. As a result, what we've done is enabled you with a utility, a BIOS verification utility that you can download on current generation models. This can be used as a one-to-one, say a break-fix scenario. I have a system that you're returning, and my service desk is going to run the evaluation locally and confirm if there's any tamper on the system before I release it into the wild again. Maybe in a less risk-adverse environment, or a more risk-averse environment. In a less risk-adverse environment, I may automate that process, leveraging either SCCM or your existing management tools and script out a repeated process. On a weekly basis, I will check the entire install base, I'll run the report, and then feed that into my other security solutions if I so need. Where we're taking that in future, and what we have already done, is integrated that into our Workspace ONE platform. Using the Workspace ONE agent, I can now automate that BIOS verification. The reason that the verification happens via cloud and that it's so critical is that it delivers 2 key benefits for you. The first is that it simply doesn't remove the forensic information. If someone is attacking your hardware layer, this is a remarkably sophisticated attack. I want to know what's happened. All of us get into an auto accident, everyone is safe. We clear the road off, we fix all of the vehicles, and about 30 days later, a gentleman in the back calls the authorities and says, "How did it happen?" I don't know, I've gotten rid of all of the evidence. In this case, again, if someone is attacking the hardware layer, I want to make certain that recognition of that event happens, but I also bring that system in for further evaluation. The second reason that we, frankly, leverage an off-host verification via cloud is that, frankly, if I can contaminate the BIOS, I have a high degree of being able to contaminate the backup that may be on the local system. We want to move away from the potentially contaminated environment to do our safety check. If you think about Safe BIOS today, as we move into about the February timeframe next year, you will see incremental building blocks and incremental layers of protection that we'll be happy to announce in future. Safe Screen is frankly a privacy filter integrated on the 7000 series notebooks. From a trusted access perspective, we leverage Workspace ONE to provide more context for the login activity. Contextual access to recognize whether or not I'm logging in here from Orlando or from my home office in Austin, and then generating the right response for the user. At the same time, I can also start to detect multiple login activities. Ian Haynes is logging in from Austin and logging in from Orlando at the same time. Let's help identify who the real user is and block the malicious attack. Elevate that to our security teams. Finally, from a trusted device perspective, safeguard and response and safe data are umbrella terms that roll up. Safeguard and response is our prevention capabilities. We use artificial intelligence to help you detect and prevent malware from running. We leverage endpoint detection and response at the local system to help you discover those behavioral attacks. About 61% of your attacks come through malware. The other nearly half, if you will, the 40 percentile, are coming out of behavioral attacks. Hi, I'm your IT manager. We're rolling out a new application. It's called Teams. I need your password to finish the installation. Can I have your password? How about yours? As I make those phone calls, how many folks inside your organization do I need to call before I have my first password? If you think about it, there's no malware as part of that social engineering attack. I don't need incremental tools on your device, and I get to look very much like you as I navigate your network. As a result, endpoint detection and response is a set of tools that help you detect those behavioral changes for an end user. They do so at a very high rate of efficacy. The final thing that we added to this portion of the portfolio comes to us out of the SecureWorks organization, and it is a TDR, a threat detection and response engine that now moves you beyond the endpoint to evaluate network, data center, as well as cloud, all under one platform. This can be a managed service on your behalf or standalone as a tool set. In the safe data arena, we're leveraging partnerships to do more cloud layers of CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker, as well as then encryption and encryption management at the endpoint, enabling you to manage your BitLocker environment directly through your Dell tool sets. If I think about the security layers as a whole, though, I think the critical aspect here, these capabilities that I've described are becoming open capabilities that allow you to work inside your environment and integrate with your environment, or alternatively, generate higher and higher levels of automation based on the Unified Workspace platform. So when we turn our page to management and we think about the Windows 10 transition, Windows 10 as such a wide adoption by frankly all of us in this room and across the globe has for the first time really made unified endpoint management a reality. The opportunity is there now to take these disparate devices, whatever the devices may be, under a single management source, whether that be Intune or Unified Workspace via Dell Unified Endpoint Management via Workspace ONE. Workspace ONE is a layer that we can add to your existing Intune environment or operates completely standalone. And in both contexts, it provides some key benefits around things like application store. If I think of the disparate application stores I have to manage today, one for potentially my various mobile devices, another for my Windows, and yet again others inside the organization, I can bring those all under centralized management. That includes both native applications as well as virtual applications and web-based applications as well. The second key element that Workspace ONE can add to either your existing Microsoft environment or standalone is then really a multi-tenant capability. The ability to have better multi-tenancy across many organizations is one of the key challenges that I see customers run into all the time. Whether it be a point of acquisition, I now have multiple domains that I'm trying to manage, or alternatively, my organization starts to shift. The last area that I tend to focus on when I think about Workspace ONE is really that you'll see incremental layers of integration through our various Dell technologies. I'm curious, is everyone in the room familiar with the Dell Client Command Suite? A free set of utilities enabled to work with your SCCM environment and many others. They enable the device to be very manageable on a Dell platform. That in mind, that is fully now integrated into our Workspace ONE platform. So things like our security layer that I was just describing, rather than having to script out a BIOS password, for example, I can now go into the user interface at the GUI level and type in my password. As we announced, I believe it was last August at VMworld, we're now adding BIOS password automation as part of that overall footprint. And I want you to think about that for a second. Most of your organizations don't implement a BIOS password as we poll. The reason being, the number one reason being that I hear is, frankly, I can't manage it. What if each of the devices inside your organization had the ability to have a unique password that was a strong password? And, you know, let's pause for just a half moment. What can I do if I access your system BIOS? Well, I can turn off the hard drives. I can turn off the network connections, likely the USB ports. I could erase the drive, secure erase trigger of the ATA commands for the hard drive, and then I can install an admin password and walk out the door. This sounds very much like a one-to-one level of ransomware. At the same time, if I can now attack that hardware layer, not having a BIOS password in place means that the world is a wide open oyster. I have the ability to manage a one-to-many relationship as an attacker and now have a very different impact to your organization. Think about trying to get all of the systems up and running after a ransomware attack and how that changes if I also target changes to your hardware. Putting a BIOS password in place and being able to manage that over time is a very effective first layer of security that I would recommend adding. You can do that today with Client Command Suite at the level of a password out to the one-to-many. As we move into future, you'll be able to create unique passwords across that entire install base. As I mentioned, the Client Command Suite helps you automate, optimize, and then integrate with your existing environments. And it's that integration that I'm talking about not only in Workspace ONE, but seamlessly integrated with SCCM today. These are tools that help you deploy out your image in a more effective manner. They help you pull in the drivers necessary for each new generation of Dell model and frankly slipstream into your existing imaging process. In addition to that, we can also then do things like detect whether or not there are changes on the Dell support website relative to what's inside your install base. So I can do a quick check to understand what the differences are between what I currently have deployed and if there are any updates that are relevant to my organization. With that, we're taking these integrations and pulling them fully into our unified workspace. This becomes a key building block that allows us to connect the hardware and those hardware-enabled beautiful devices with the rest of your software stack that enable your user transitions, helping you automate the steps that it takes to deliver the device out to the end user is the overall goal in this context. Then helping manage it and maintain it in a more automated fashion as well. How can I detect those changes that are necessary before an end user calls me up and says, hey, your last software patch caused an issue on my system? With that in mind, we have a telemetry-driven approach. If you think of our support response here, what we're doing is taking the various data elements that you already have at your fingertips and now elevating those to the software layer. Today, if you're unfamiliar, how many of you are currently Pro Support customers, just out of curiosity? A handful. With your Pro Support capabilities, you're also accessing Support Assist. This is an agent that can be deployed to the device and do proactive hardware detection of failure. The classic example is I have a hard drive that's about to fail. We can detect the smart failures before the failure occurs. That's critical. I can deliver and have an automated service technician come out and a status that's reported to IT. To replace the drive, we can now migrate the information before the hard drive fails, right? That's the legacy of Support Assist. Where we're moving to, and as we launch here in November, is now the ability to see things like application crashes and deploy updates out to your entire fleet. The fleet that's running Support Assist managed in a one-to-many relationship. So think about this, and I often get to poll teams as I go across the globe having conversations similar to this to say, when was the last time you had a significant software issue, right? How did you address that? Did you call IT? Or instead, did you simply reboot the system? The vast majority of the time, there's only a handful that have called in. That 50% number that we talk about is only one of the smoke signals that is being sent inside your organization. If you don't know about the application crash, how do you take proactive action? Simply being able to see the data around which applications inside your organization may have impacted user productivity has an outsized impact that you can now deliver to that organization. If you think about hardware utilization as well, version 1 of an application that is running at what we would anticipate for that CPU utilization, and version 2 that I've rolled out to my innovation group in the middle here is now running at 30% more CPU utilization. Before I distribute that out to the rest of my environment, let's find out what's going on. Maybe halt that deployment until we've had an opportunity to evaluate the changes needed. All of that in mind, Pro Support is that traditional 24/7 support for your organizations. We weave that into the rest of the unified workspace to really now start delivering on 2 models. The first model is simply the ability to not only help you support your environment, but if you so desire, to allow Dell to take on management for your organization. We do this as a service that we call Pro Manage today. We manage both the environment of your application, your driver updates and system configuration updates, as well as then take on the direct phone support, the 24/7 support. We do that as custom services outside of the standard offers as well to allow you to scale up or scale down to meet your specific needs. So whether those tools are standalone and you adopt directly and manage yourself, or want to offset to Dell, you have both of those models available to you. The broader context for Unified Workspace is that we want to enable you to accelerate your overall transformation and the transformation of your business. The ability to quickly and easily take in new technology and then shift as your business needs change is what we're all about. We want to help you transform your business, not only with smarter and faster experiences using Dell hardware, but also using the Dell Unified Workspace. Accelerate your deployment, and over time, help you more and more automate those sort of run the business tasks. Let us take part of that 80% off of your shoulders so that we can now focus on the user experience that we've been so destined to get to for so long now. That in mind, I want to thank you for coming into our Unified Workspace session. I will be here for just a moment, but I do want to make certain that we're cognizant of the time. If you do have incremental sessions, thank you very much for your time here today.